Let us pray. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. Almagtige God, ons bid dat die gedurende ons vergadering so ons die nodige wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelele Elizabeth letu nabantu balo. Umasele ukulungu kwipondo letu. Kosi sikelele i Afrika. Ina abantuano bayo. Kokela in kokele zayo. Unieke ikokolo i Afrika. Hold this, Rebecca, in your holy name. Amen. The Secretary will read the first order.
On vote 1, Premier, Western Cape Appropriation Bill.
I see the Premier.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, honourable members. The Department of the Premier's main budget for 2019-20 is 1.57 billion rand. Compared to the 2018-19 adjusted budget, the aggregate budget allocation represents a baseline increase of about 5%. However, the department had to provide for an increase in conditions of service for 2019 and 2020 of 8.3%, which means that the budget for goods and services remains under pressure. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's important for us to recall that the national government went right outside the mandate and entirely exceeded the available envelope of the cost of employment to agree to an 8.3% increase, which is making it all the more difficult to have the budget we require for actual service delivery. And that is a massive failure of nerve and of backbone on behalf of the national government. Remaining budget risks the department would find difficult to absorb going forward are the impact of higher inflation on the current and future public service wage agreements, as well as the impact of the rand-dollar exchange rate on licensing and capital expenditure in the Centre for E-Innovation. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are caught in a double bind here. On the one hand, we are spending billions more than was budgeted for or available on salaries. And on the other hand, given the weakness of the rand against international currencies, we have to take some of those precious resources to make up for the rand's weakness in licensing costs and other things. And all of this erodes the base budget for actual service delivery. Honourable members, government operates within the area of managing disparate data, many applications, and business processes. To drive business performance, the Western Cape government has already embarked on using performance measurement as a product of monitoring and evaluation, and business intelligence through BizBrain as a solution in delivering strategic data and information. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the most important things that I have learnt in my period in government is the importance of data. But not just general data, not just collecting all the information we can possibly have from our databases, but purpose-driven data. Data that is required to know whether we are on track to achieve our strategic plans. And I think that in the last 5 years, we have made important steps in that direction to get strategic data linked to the purpose of informing us whether or not we are making progress to achieving the outcomes we want. And we need to make progress across the board in that. It is one thing to have huge amounts of big data. It is quite another to tailor the information you need to a purpose and an outcome. And we have a lot of base data. We need to apply it strategically to measure whether our strategies are succeeding. In line with the global data agenda, the Western Cape government is moving towards a data-driven organisation for better evidence and decision-making, and I must add here, linked to our provincial strategic plan and priorities. And for this reason, province-wide data governance is embarked upon as a transversal and strategic intervention to respond to the high demand for coherence in the production and use of data and information to inform evidence-based decision-making and analysis. And I will be gone in just over a month. I'm waiting for you to applaud, Honourable Opposition. I gave you the specific break there to applaud. Anyway, I'll carry on. I will be gone in just a little over a month, and I certainly won't in any way try to influence the ongoing administration. But if there's one bit of advice I would like to give, is for all ministers in the future cabinet to take data very seriously, strategically linked to their provincial strategic objectives and their transversal and departmental plans, so that they have good information they require as to whether they are making progress towards quantified goals. We've got a lot of raw data. What we don't have is targeted data that can be used strategically for informed management decisions. And we've seen that above all in this last week, where we were trying to plan for the risk of a possible complete blackout. The lack of data that we had in order to make strategic decisions was really shocking, and that was not the lack of our data, because of course electricity generation and transmission is a national government competency. Now, essential to our digital government strategy, the province-wide data governance strategy includes the management of the availability, usability, integrity, and security of data assets. And I'm happy to report that funds have been allocated towards this priority over the 2019 MTEF period. The Master Plan on Province-wide Data Governance was approved by the Cabinet on the 6th of December 2017. This is more than a year ago. The PWDG program is pursuing 4 ambitious missions. These are to A, produce reliable and accurate data and information across the Western Cape government, to partner in data and information products and systems, 3, to ensure accountability and transparency of data information, and 4, to keep stakeholders informed. But there must be a 5th one, and it needs to be the first one, to ensure that we identify what data is strategically needed in order to take the key management decisions we require to achieve our objectives. That has to be number 1 in the data governance strategy, and even if that strategy has to be amended, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to recommend that it be amended, because there's no use in having data for the sake of having data. What you need data for is to be able to pursue your objectives and understand whether or not you are on the right path. And it is often not as easy as it sounds, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to get the right data, because working out what data will tell you whether or not you're on the right path is a very difficult thing. And often it's precisely that data that you don't have and that you still have to get. So data governance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is not a simple thing. It is highly complex, and it needs to be led by people who are extremely strategic in their thinking and who understand the provincial strategic goals, how they are transversal, what information is needed, how we're going to get it, how we're going to make sure it is good information, and how we're going to apply it in decision-making. And in a sense, that has to critically be the responsibility of all the ministers in the new cabinet. It has to be, because I cannot tell you how indispensable good data is to determining where you're going and whether you are getting there. Right, so I've just added another one, and I'm going to ask for that particular data governance plan to be amended. The next 3 years will see the implementation with defined PWDG delivery and results to be achieved. The scope of work relates to the identified high-level outputs, which cover the following: data quality management, master data management, logical data warehouse, data and information governance, and data analytics capability. Now, data analytics capability is really very important, but it must start with a strategic political understanding of the data required to determine whether we are achieving our provincial strategic goals. The Western Cape's broadband strategy and implementation plan is aligned with South Africa Connect, which is South Africa's broadband strategy, which plans to improve broadband penetration across the country. It further acknowledges government's role as anchor tenant, the need to aggregate demand, and the need for open access. It is anticipated that because of its foresight in this regard, the Western Cape government will be in a position to achieve the targets as set out in South Africa Connect, even in our most rural areas. I had a report back yesterday, and I'm delighted to get reports from some of our most rural schools who even only have a 10 megabyte connection, that with good management and good off-net providers, they are doing very well. Of course, in others, that is not the case, and we are investigating each and every one to find out what the problems are, but we are making very good progress and analyzing where every single problem exists. During the 2019 MTEF period, this department will continue its investment in phase 2 of the provincial broadband program by increasing the minimum network speeds to 100 megabits per second. And where that has happened, and we've already connected over 600 sites, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to 100 megabits per second, it has transformed the usability and speed of the internet. There are over 500 schools that I understand have been connected to over 100 megabits per second, and when I visit them and hear the difference in the experience between 10 megabits and 100 megabits, it is really chalk and cheese. And when we get to the gigabyte connection, which is phase 3, it will really make an extraordinary difference. We will also intensify our efforts to derive consequent value from the broadband network by increasing the number of public Wi-Fi hotspots to 1,600, and to continue effecting telephony savings by migrating more corporate sites to the voice over internet platform. The Centre for E-Innovation is providing enabling services to DCAS, the Western Cape Education Department, DDAT, DSD, and DOCS, to ensure that the key outcomes of the e-learning, e-skills, and after-school game changers are met. The implementation of the e-learning game changer has resulted in a significant requirement for growth in the CEI support environment, and the demand in this area will continue to grow. 328 schools, Deputy Speaker, have had full LAN rollouts. 841 schools have had slim labs rolled out. That's sometimes a challenge because they've been very used to connecting to their own servers. And as we're moving to a cloud-based solution, people miss their own servers and are missing that availability of data, but we want to make it open access. That's why we're doing the cloud link. But Deputy Speaker, one massive problem has arisen, which I think I need to table in this House. We are compelled to work through CETA. This is not an option. It is compulsory in terms of the law. In investigating very closely why we are having some problems in schools around accessing data and uploading and downloading data, we have established that CETA's link to the cloud, which is the link we have to work through, is only 1 gigabyte for the whole province. Now that is big for one school. It is very, very small for the whole province. And I'm working hard with CETA to wake them up to the fact that they need to move to 10 gigs immediately. Otherwise, all the infrastructure that we put in is pretty much useless because it is assumed that it will be cloud-based, not individual server-based in each institution. And so the link to the cloud has to be quick and seamless and really solid. And that is CETA's job. And I've learned that diagnosing where the problem is such a difficult thing in IT because there's so many links in the chain. And establishing that CETA was the core problem in that link has at least taken us to understanding where it is and how we resolve it. But that we must resolve, and I'm very glad that Mr. Lance Williams, who used to head up our CEI, is now there and is giving a lot of assistance in this particular process. The implementation of the e-learning game changer has resulted in a significant requirement for growth in the CEI support environment. I've already said that, and the demand in this area will continue to grow. 328 schools have full land rollout, 841 schools have slim labs rolled out, and 1,242 schools are connected to broadband, which is a wonderful achievement. Through the digital governance strategy, the CEI aims to coordinate and direct all provincial ICT initiatives towards optimizing and transforming existing public services and to create new public services for citizens of the Western Cape through digital empowerment of residents and employees. During the year ahead, Deputy Speaker, the Department will be developing the Digital Transformation Plan, which will be the implementation plan for the digital government strategy. This will be done through a series of workshops and consultations with other departments, citizens, academia, businesses, as well as local and national government. Cloud computing presents an opportunity for the department to offer scalable and secure ICT services. That's if CETA will fix the link that supports business requirements while optimizing costs and efficiencies. Cloud computing changes the traditional business and ICT model by enabling organizations to consume resources such as platforms, applications, and storage as a utility rather than having to build and maintain computing infrastructures in-house. But I have to stress again, this requires CETA to be ensuring that the link to the cloud is adequate to carry the traffic at the speed required. The Western Cape Government is leveraging the high-speed broadband connectivity to migrate major workloads to the cloud, and that will come to a grinding halt unless the connectivity is much higher than it currently is, and gradually reducing our dependence on our on-premise infrastructure. But the great risk that I have found of doing this when it doesn't work is that people become desperate to reinstate the on-premise infrastructure, such as servers. And if our connectivity, for example, doesn't work in schools because of whatever problems there are in the multiple players that have to be involved, including off-net service providers to achieve social objectives rather than technical objectives, you have a problem where people just say, forget about this. We're moving back to our old service provider, and they would prefer to pay a lot of money for a reliable service provider than take what we have paid a lot of money for and which is supposed to be a free service to the school. So these things we have to get right, because we can say in theory, yes, we want cloud-based services so that on-site infrastructure isn't required, but then it's got to work, and CETA has to come to the party. Another key priority focus, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the department is maintaining and enhancing the suite of provincial transversal applications, which include, amongst others, BizBrain, BRIS projects, enterprise content management, as well as the NPO system of the Department of Social Development. The main benefits derived from having core transversal systems are sharing of platforms, integration of data, and seamless integration of solutions. But again, unless all of those are linked to an objective that a cabinet or ministers or a transversal management team want to achieve, all of those excellent platforms just sit there because you don't know how to apply them and use them in the daily work to which you're trying to devote your energies to achieving an outcome. And that link, data has to have a purpose which starts with an outcome. What do you need to know? Where do you get it? How do you use it? How do you make strategic management decisions from it? Huh? Uthini? Andiva? Hayi, bayazi yonke into. Kufuneka ufunda. Ufunde. Vuka mawulele. Yathetha kakhulu mama. Okay. All right. The convergence of voice, data, and video onto the network and the digitalization of traditional non-ICT equipment, non-ICT solutions, and other non-ICT periphery is a key area of innovation as it is driving the expansion, enhancement, and capacity of the network and ICT infrastructure. And I must confess, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I don't know what that sentence means, but I will find out immediately afterwards. This includes video conference solutions, boardroom media technologies, building security and surveillance solutions and equipment, as well as building management facilities and equipment being connected over the Western Cape government networks. Now I understand what it means. This is the Internet of Things, manifesting internally and locally across the Western Cape government. Yes, this is absolutely critical, this Internet of Things that links everything together and enables us not only to ensure that our fridges at home can order milk from Pick and Pay when we're running low, but that we can link key infrastructure to alert us to all kinds of issues in the ongoing management of all the resources that we have. And the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence is literally mind-boggling when you see what it is capable of. We might be able to have MPs with artificial intelligence who outpace what the real human thing is able to do. In recent years, the global cybersecurity environment has evolved significantly with a drastic increase in the volume and complexity of threat actors and attack methods used. The regulatory environment has also evolved to require more stringent compliance and data protection, e.g. the Protection of Personal Information Act, which has requirements across all the systems. In addition, the expansion of the Western Cape government IT environment has also brought about greater complexity, risk, and security requirements. This includes the need to protect in excess of 24,500 workstations, over 350 key business applications, and an extensive data environment over 3 networks consisting of over 2,000 sites. Sufficient funding has been allocated for this purpose. That's an enormous network. Honourable members, the Department acknowledges that there is a need for a provincial public participation strategy which will create platform for engagement for citizens to participate meaningfully in government service delivery. The whole of society approach is emerging as an alternative approach to service delivery within government. It aims to encourage and put into practice a new way of working in partnership across all levels of government, as well as with civil society, business, NGOs, and intermediary organizations. The aim of this approach is to achieve the shared purpose of socio-economic development for the benefit of all South Africans. The approach focuses on shared purpose, the use of collated data to establish a common understanding of the problem, planned interventions, and track impact. And that's the strategic use of data. It also uses a systems approach for interventions and successful community entry. The whole of society approach provides for the impetus for community engagement. The approach seeks to engage communities in a spatial context and is important to move towards greater citizen centricity. Now, I get nervous about the spatial context because spatial context is good for some projects, but not good for all projects. And it's really important for us to understand that. The Western Cape Government plans to explore innovative and sustainable models for frontline service delivery that can significantly improve the citizen experience when accessing government information or services through every available service interface channel. The solution lies in developing citizen-centric models that are based on citizen-focused research, draw inspiration from the relative success with which both the private sector and other governments have addressed their challenges, as well as thinking out of the box to initiate novel approaches to solving local issues. But public participation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I need to say in parentheses, is often a major challenge because people can choose what is not feasible. So, for example, when we were dealing with the District 6 challenge, which we still are, and some very important court cases have been resolved in a positive direction to make the National Department move on this process at last. When public participation happens, one sees that people want a large plot with a single house on it. Now, in a context like the land in District 6, that is not appropriate. So the critical thing in public participation is to define the options realistically and sustainably to involve the public in debating the best outcome within the parameters that are feasible. Through the service interface strategy, the Western Cape Government aims to improve the citizen satisfaction levels when engaging government by listening and reacting to citizens' needs, addressing the service levels and quality of frontline service delivery facilities and services, increasing the information and service access channels, and strengthening those programs that aim to take services to the people. In order to address the challenges holistically, the service interface strategy will focus on 4 service delivery areas. Number 1, service experience research and monitoring and evaluation. Secondly, frontline service delivery improvement. Third, digital government enhancement. 4, increased citizen access to services and information. Honourable members, we currently have 70 Cape Access Centres in our province, and they are something that we can be greatly proud of. They mostly exist in small, remote, rural towns and are used very intensively by the local population. Cape Access is one of the key programs for improving access to ICTs and increasing digital literacy within the rural areas of the Western Cape. At these centres, communities have free access to computers, printing and scanning facilities. By providing ICT training and access to email facilities and internet, low-income communities have access to government services and products and various online services. They can also communicate more effectively with government, have access to important information around new business opportunities and jobs, and can also transact online. More importantly, communities are able to connect to other communities within the province, around South Africa, and around the world. Cape Access contributes to empowering poorer communities to tackle the challenges of poverty. As such, the program makes a significant contribution to the Provincial Spatial Development Framework and growth of potential towns. Due to severely constrained resources, the Department, in collaboration with the municipalities, will be rolling out 5 new Cape Access Centres during the 2019-20 financial year. I wish it could be 3 times that number. Good governance is regarded as the cornerstone of a capable state that creates opportunities for citizens to live lives that they value. Governance frameworks and maturity models were developed that provide departments with a basis to determine and improve corporate governance. Finding the right indicators to measure the right outcomes and impacts is complex, that's what I've been saying all along, in the governance space, and hence the need to collaborate with other external institutions such as the Human Sciences Research Council and Stats SA. Again, though, the data has to have a purpose and be used to measure progress towards a defined objective. This will move the measurement of governance beyond the current impact measurement tool, which measures only compliance. And this has been a theme that I've had throughout the 2 terms that I've been in office. Compliance measures whether you are sticking to every single rule meticulously. And I can understand why that is necessary in such a corrupt country. But in the new 4th Industrial Revolution, with the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, the best governments in the world are going to be those that can innovate, that can do new things with new technologies such as the blockchain, and which can experiment, and which can try new approaches. And it is impossible to do that within our compliance environment. In fact, if something hasn't been done before, if something doesn't have a regulation that exists to control it, we may not do it. And I cannot tell you how much that hampers progress in government. If it weren't for the extent of the corruption in South Africa, we would be able to do a whole range of innovative things that we are blocked from doing now. And I would really like to urge our successors to look critically at how we speak to the Auditor General, to get a framework within which innovation is possible, obviously without corruption. And one of the best models worldwide is what is known as the sandbox model, where you say, this looks like something we should experiment with. We will ring fence it. It's almost like having a special economic zone. This area will be exempt from all these terrible rules so that we can pilot and test whether it can have an impact. And there are so many spectacular new technologies that can transform the way we do things. I've recently been reading and looking at the blockchain. Quite extraordinary what that can open up. But we cannot touch it because none of the rules or regulations or laws or compliance frameworks or directives have ever heard of blockchain before. And so instead of following on where everyone else is, we should be learning from countries as spectacularly successful, tiny countries as Malta. It is now the world leader on blockchain applications in the public sector because they got the regulation right and they got ahead of the game. And that's one of the things that I failed to achieve, Deputy Speaker, in my term in office, but I'm sure my successors will achieve that. Right. Finding the right indicator, yeah, okay, beyond compliance, that's what I was talking about. A Western Cape Government Good Governance Index will be designed in 2019-20. Now, please, can that not just be more compliance? Can we please build in innovation, obviously without corruption into it? This includes indicator selection, index development methodology, index range definitions, and data sourcing. In closing, I would very much like to thank the DG. You only have to listen to me speaking like this once in a while. The poor DG has to listen to this every single week. And I greatly appreciate how he takes some of my crazy ideas and says that will land you in jail if you carry on that path. So he's probably the only reason that I'm not in jail yet. And on the ideas that can be retrofitted into the compliance framework that happens. And running up very close I get an essay on every single financial submission is Mr. Dricus Passon, who's the Chief Financial Officer and who's kept us on the straight and narrow. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much to Mr. Dalen Mitchell, who is Chair of the Portfolio Committee, who calls me to account very regularly, and to all the members of the Portfolio Committee, even the members of the Honourable Opposition. When you aren't trying to be, well, let me just say thank you. Thank you very much.
Order. The Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker, the Department of the Premier in the Western Cape functions in accordance with the following mission statement: to embed good governance and to enable integrated service delivery in the Western Cape through partnership, innovation and people excellence. When looking at the budget allocation of this department, it is very clear that it has aligned itself very closely to this mission statement. We know that despite the budget cuts to the Western Cape, as a result of continuous corruption and maladministration by the ANC at national level, our government will continue to lead in governance, service delivery and economic growth in South Africa. Honourable Speaker, we are fortunate to live in a province where thanks to the leadership of the Premier, over the last 10 years, 82% of the provincial budget is spent on the poor. Over 80% of Western Cape schools have access to free internet. 91.5% of Western Cape residents live within 30 minutes of healthcare. 130 billion rand in new developments have been approved. 42 billion rand has been spent on infrastructure. But most importantly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 171 billion rand has been spent on education, skills, and social opportunities for the youth of this province. This, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is only possible when government provides a solid base upon which a capable state can be built through innovation, inclusion, and a commitment to rooting out corruption and spending taxpayers' money on the services that the taxpayer expects. It is these simple commitments which have singled out the leadership of Premier Zille as one of the leading public servants of our time. And I would like to sincerely thank her for her commitment to the Department of the Premier, but more so to the citizens of the Western Cape. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I welcome the appropriation of just over 1.57 billion rand for the Department of the Premier's 2019-2020 budget. Considering that this government has received an 83% clean audit outcome, the highest in the country, I know that this money will be spent on the services needed by the people of this province. And I know that the incoming Western Cape Premier, Alan Winde, will continue on this trajectory laid out by Premier Zille. Although I welcome this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in light of the current weak economic and shrinking fiscal environment, the department's maneuverability during this MTF period will be constrained. However, the department made a commitment that the impact of these limitations will be carefully monitored and managed by the department. In terms of Programme 4, the Centre for E-Innovation, I welcome the following earmarked allocations. 295 million rand allocated to the broadband project, with an increase of 308 million in 2020-21 and a further 325 million in 2021-22. Just over 16 million rand for transversal ICT infrastructure needs. This is particularly important to sustain the province's ICT network moving forward, as it forms the basis of much of the e-innovation, which forms the basis of preparing the Western Cape for the 4th and 5th industrial revolutions in the coming years, and 38 million rand to broadband rollout of Wi-Fi hotspots to municipalities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, again, this is crucial to get each and every resident of the Western Cape online in order to access a broader range of government services and ensure sound and efficient service delivery to all four corners of this province. Honourable Deputy Speaker, by looking at the budget allocation of this department over the last 5 years, and the prioritization of the funds made available, it is clear that the political leadership in this province is aligned with not only the needs of the province, but the needs of each and every citizen. The budget of the Western Cape's Department of the Premier has been rightly focused on digitizing infrastructure necessary for governance, fast-tracking the rollout of government services, and ensuring freedoms in a digital world. Budgeting for free access to internet and ICT services for all residents has always been at the forefront of this department, and rightly so, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But access to free broadband and internet access transcends mere good governance. The South African Human Rights Commission states that free internet access for all South Africans should be a human right. Indeed, the right to information, which can only be ensured through reliable and free internet access, is one of our constitutional rights. If we look at the national government, where digital migration has been delayed for many years and corruption at the Independent Communication Authority of South Africa is rife, this human right has been trampled upon by the national ANC. I'm happy to see that this budget not only prioritizes services to the province's residents, but it ensures that this DA-led Western Cape government upholds the right to free access to information. This is why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the 38 million rand to broadband rollout of Wi-Fi hotspots to municipalities in the 2019-2020 budget is so important, and I welcome this allocation. In addition to this, I also welcome an allocation of just over 16 million rand for province-wide data governance to further ensure access to e-services and internet in order to deliver on the department's promise of innovation and interconnectivity for the Western Cape. Honourable Speaker, the Standing Committee on the Premier has always made a robust contribution to the department, ensuring accountability and the best kind of governance that our residents deserve. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every member of the Standing Committee for their contribution over the past 5 years as we hold this department to account and refine policy to best serve the people of this province. It has been my absolute pleasure working with each one of you. Honourable Deputy Speaker, as this is my final budget vote speech for the 5th Parliament, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for having been allocated the position of chairpersonship of this committee, enforcing accountability to best serve the people of the Western Cape and South Africa at large.
Order. 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 Honourable Janti, you've made your mark, you've made your entrance. Now please refrain from doing it again. Honourable Mitchell, you may finish off. You may continue.
Okay. To express my deepest gratitude for having been allocated the chairpersonship of this committee, enforcing accountability to best serve the people of the Western Cape and South Africa at large. I would like to thank the colleagues in the Department of the Premier, under the leadership of Advocate Gerber, as well as Premier Zille, for providing the political leadership to this department for the last decade. A special word of thanks, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to the very able committee coordinator, Ms. Wasima Kamish Ahmad, Ms. Masintle Nonsapi, the assistant coordinator, Ms. Lizette Klute and Mr. Mario Sassman for their never-ending support during this term, as well as the research office on the 5th floor. Honourable Speaker, it's my pleasure to stand here today and support Vote 1, the Department of the Premier. I thank you.
The Honourable Magaka.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, allow me to jump straight to Program 5 without wasting time. The decrease from program support should be rejected, while at the same time, the 27% increase for sub-program 5.2 should be welcomed. This is so because in the previous year, it took the Hawks investigation to unearth a web of corruption in municipalities in this province. This was after a lengthy period of provincial government turning a blind eye on the challenge of corruption in municipalities. We also had the paper video scandal, which I believe wouldn't have happened if we had an effective enterprise risk management unit. What about the lavish birthday for MEC Matigizela by service providers in his department? Would have happened if the team was strengthened. This 27% increase is welcome addition. The increase in budget for legal services is really concerning. Firstly, Annexure A on page 43 shows an over 181% increase in legal costs for the department. This shows that the Premier is abusing the public purpose for her personal things. For instance, she praised colonialism on Twitter. She was taken to the public protector. She was found guilty of contravening the Executive Ethics Code, and she took the report on review using the public purse. This is abuse for taxpayers' money. Secondly, she failed to establish an office for environmental commissioner. She was taken to court to force her to appoint the commission. Again, she used public money to defend her wrong decisions. So, it is clear that the increase for legal services will be used to clean up after Honourable Zille's mess, even after she has left. Over 66% of this department's budget is allocated to Program 4, where the province experienced a drop in the ICT government majority rating. The APP also identified a number of risks like increasing demands for ICT services in a resource-constrained environment. Despite all of this, budget for sub-program 4.2 and 4.3 have been reduced drastically. The over 37% increase for sub-program 4.4, Connected Government and Infrastructure Service, will fund the first step of the Premier's promise to convert 1,600 of provinces' broadband points into free Wi-Fi sites where data will be sold to the public when daily limit is up. For this year, only 957 sites will be upgraded to phase 2. According to Premier's 2014 SOPA promises, this should have happened in 2018 already. So it means she failed on her promises. Moving on to Program 3. MEC Mayor bragged about a budget for youth, referring among others to the Yebo program. It is really disappointing that he only budgeted just over 40 million over the 2019 MTF for this year. This after year, thousands of applications are rejected in the program because of this small budget. This shows the DA does not take young people serious in this province. In Program 3, Department's social contribution have been decreased, as well as bursaries for employees. These kinds of decisions paint a picture of a Premier that is anti-transformation and does not prioritize the well-being of employees. The budget cut for compensation of employees under the Program 1 reveals the attitude of this Premier and her government towards employees. The Premier must tell us how many employees she has fired to make up that 4.22% reduction in the compensation of employees' expenditure. This is a department that boasts an 11.1 annual turnover rate. This is an indication of toxic working environment in the department. We have to be worried about this trend. For Solange Rose once told us that she was forced to resign as a result of the Premier's regular bullying, abuse, threats, and insults on a number of occasions, as well as her lack of trust in her capacity and competency, mainly because she was not a DA member. To work comfort allegiance is in the DA, and your only leader under the sun is Honorable Helen Zille, and you don't trust black people also. When the ANC was in government, there were so many black people in senior management positions in all the departments. The obliteration of black senior managers in the provincial government is a cause of serious concern. The ANC has to resolve this immediately when it took over power. For instance, out of 71 positions in the senior to top management in the department of the Premier, there are only 7 Africans. The question is whether the Premier used the same bullying tactic she used on Solange to force out black senior managers in the department. Solange also mentioned that the Premier had no confidence in the capacity and competence of the staff in the police unit. In this budget, we witnessed the Premier's pledge to the policy and strategy program with over 9% decrease to its budget. The budget cuts for Program 1 are setting up the next Premier for failure. Deputy Speaker, in her forward in the APP, the Premier stated that her term was a well-run race which created opportunities for the next term. Allowed to deal with this line. The reality is that Premier's 10 years reign was marked by widening inequality, rising cost of living, racism, corruption, and crime, gangsterism, which resulted in Western Cape being a murder capital and leading province in terms of women and children, let alone that they consistently work with gangsters in order to maintain power in the province. Let alone also the fact that she reversed the gains achieved by this province's citizens, especially the black majority, including undermining transformation in the Premier's department. Hence today, this department is among the worst departments in terms of poor reflection of the demographics of this province. In fact, the Premier's department went back to that period of Ernest Kriel. The DA has failed the poor in the province. When DA speak of the whole society approach, in actual fact, it means the life of all white citizens, because it doesn't believe that Africans, including colored majority, exist in this province. Since this is a false start, where Africans are mere refugees from the Eastern Cape, Western Cape under Honorable Premier Zille is more of a German colony. The Premier speaks of finalization of the Children's Commission Bill. What she omits to mention is that it took her 10 long years to finalize this process. The ANC and civil society had to work together to get her to start working on the bill. In 2009, when she came into the office, she promised to establish Children's Commission as well as Commission for Environment. Reality is that she is now leaving office and none of these have been completed. She will be remembered as a stumbling block in the process of appointing Children's Commission. She tried to play defensive role by claiming that the ANC didn't do it either, but she forgot also to remind herself that the ANC didn't come out loud and make a wild commitment to appoint the commission, and she did make the particular commitment. Her term of office is over, and where is the Children's Commission? This is another example of how she failed the people of the Western Cape.
Order.
Let me end.
May I continue? Your time has not expired.
Let me end by appreciating working with her, though. She's naturally a nice person. How I wish the trip to Australia I had, I was with her, rather than the speaker. Thank you very much.
Order. Order. Before I see the Premier, I just want to... In the absence of the EFF and the ACDP, I'll see the Premier to respond.
I was going to ask you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if it is parliamentary for me to cross the floor and give the Honourable Magaka a hug. As a final gesture. Let me say, Diyamthanda kakhulu. Diyamthanda kakhulu.
Order. Order.
You see this? This is what...
Order.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is what makes politics totally incomprehensible. I get many, many people asking me, how can you ever speak to those people again? And they're amazed. The general public.
Honourable Janky,
the general public.
Order.
And I say to them, you know, I even like those guys. That's what politics is. You fight very hard in the public domain, and you go and have a cup of tea or a beer or something afterwards. And I had a fabulous lunch one day with the Honourable Magaka in Hermanus, I remember. We were sitting on the beachfront. And we had a really good chat. And amazingly, we found each other on a lot of issues, which I won't go into now. Yeah. Well, you know, the irony is that I'm definitely not a Marxist and I'm definitely not a socialist, but in my instinct, I'm both of those. But I do not try and tell other people what to do, and I don't believe the state should manipulate. So I'm a person who believes in liberal, open societies and freedom of choice, and the choices I make are to live modestly. Yeah. Now, as much as I like the Honourable Magaka, I'm going to set him right on a few issues, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am unbelievably proud of our enterprise risk management department in this government. They investigate huge numbers of things and resolve a great many of them, and must take credit for a lot of the accolades that we get around running clean government. If the very worst scandal, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that they can find about me is that a dedicated mathematics teacher working in Khayelitsha wanted to use government's equipment to give free maths lessons to indigent pupils in the township during the holidays, if that is the worst scandal they can find about me, there clearly hasn't been corruption. Now, you see, the Honourable Doug Moore, the only way he can finger this is to perpetuate something that is totally false. When he did that, there was no company. I will show you the forms and whatever. There was no company in 2014. He was an ordinary teacher in an ordinary school. And the bottom line, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is this. In order to pretend that there was, I'm talking about the point that the Honourable Magaka made, and will you please protect me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, so I can answer this crucial point. You raised it now, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The only way that the Honourable Doug Moore could try to create a scandal where there is none is by twisting and perverting and misquoting a statement from the website by inserting completely incorrectly a phrase that isn't in the original to claim falsely that a company was started in 2014. That is fraud, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is fraud. And I will take that matter further. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is the point that the Honourable Doug Moore has kept making, and I would like to add another point. There were many other, and it wasn't a company, it was an app, not a company. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there were many other NGOs, companies, service providers that used the exact same equipment 10 days later. There was no advantage, no conflict of interest, not even a perception of conflict of interest. The only people that benefited, no, there wasn't any nepotism at all, because I helped everybody else do that. Of course the public protector does, but Tito Mboweni disagrees with the public protector. So does Provin Gordon. So does Angie Mochecha. The problem is the public protector, not all of them. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a total manipulation of the facts to get at me and to make a completely dedicated mathematics teacher lose heart and be offered options to go abroad, which I'm desperately not wanting him to accept. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can forgive the Honourable Opposition many things, but what I cannot forgive them is when they attack my family to get at me. And I must tell the Honourable Doug Moore one thing. He who hid in my house when he was running away from the security police and saw my kid when my kid was this high, I will never forgive him for that. And you know, the karma in the universe will come back to him on this issue. Believe me, because there was never any corruption, any maladministration, any nepotism, none. I assisted everybody who came to me, and I can prove it with all the emails and everything there is.
We don't take that aid away from you.
And so the manipulation,
So why do you mix the two things? Officials in your department disagree with you?
they absolutely did not. They absolutely did not. You show me one thing where people disagreed with me. Let me come to Ms. Rosa, that was also mentioned here. I was going to go through everybody sequentially. I'll come to Ms. Rosa. Ms. Rosa worked in the policy unit.
And you found her there.
I found her there. I found her and many people who'd been appointed in positions they shouldn't have got. Now, I'd also like to say I found Virginia Peterson there. I found a whole lot of other deployees there. The amazing thing is that we did not have an enterprise risk management unit at that stage that could actually get to the core of all the corruption that happened there. But now we have got one. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in a policy unit, in any government, anywhere in the world, the policy unit has to understand the mandate of the voters. In the Western Cape, 59% of voters voted for the DA's policy mandate. I made it clear to the members of the policy unit that if they were able and willing to research and implement the voters' mandate according to DA policy, competently and well, they were welcome to stay. If one thing above all else needs to be aligned to the government of the day, it is obviously a policy unit. Ms. Rosa, and her name was raised here, so let me tell you quite frankly, thought, I think, that she was working at a university, because she took a 6-month sabbatical to complete her PhD and still didn't complete her PhD. And she was... It's not getting personal. It is explaining why I called people to account. Because people can't do what they like when they are supposed to be doing a job of work. And I would have failed in my responsibility had I allowed a dereliction of duty such as had been happening in that policy unit. And then I wanted to see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some of the policies that were being produced there. And I could not believe my eyes. Yes, of course I didn't like them, because they weren't based on even the basic points of departure of the voters' mandate, which is DA policy. We can't produce ANC and EFF policy and even incoherent policy, from a policy unit in this government. I can show you some of the policy papers. Paper video never came into the issue. It never once came into the issue. Never once. What did come out very clearly, paper video was not discussed. What did come out very clearly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what did come out very clearly was that they were quite incapable of switching to a demand-driven approach. They were focused on a supply-side approach, driven by government knows what's best, and we in the ANC understand what the people need. And if you cannot switch your mindset from that, you don't belong in a policy unit of the DA government. Now, can I just explain this? I don't ask anybody's political affiliation. But what if they work in a policy unit, they have to understand the voters' policy mandate. They have to understand the voters' policy mandate. And they work in the Premier's department, and I didn't even know what policies they were working on. It was totally compliance-driven. So what happened was they had to, on the APPs, they had to produce, let's say, 5 policy papers a year. Tick, 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 tick. All 5 policy papers are produced. I say, please, may I read these policy papers?
It's still happening in all the departments.
I looked at those policy papers and they were totally shocking. I didn't understand why those policies had been commissioned, who commissioned them, what research they were based on, what the findings were. I've got to call somebody to account for that. And believe me, I did it. I don't bully people. I do not bully people. What I do is call people to account.
Order. Order.
I am answering the points that would be made here without any basis.
Order.
Well, then you mustn't raise her here, because then I'll tell you the truth. Then I'll tell you the truth. I gave her many, many chances.
Coming from you.
Agbare Davids, asseblief.
You see, now, that is so outrageous, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That
Order.
is so
Order.
outrageous. It's exactly the same thing as attacking people's family members to get to them with innuendo and distortions
Order.
and misinformation.
Honourable Davids, please quiet. Honourable Davids, stop into the dialogue now with the Premier.
Disgraceful, Mr. Deputy Speaker, disgraceful. So, of course, all the Honourable Magatla can do is to quote another complete invention of his. No one here has ever praised colonialism. No one here has ever praised colonialism, least of all me. I probably spent far more time and effort in my life fighting the legacy of colonialism and apartheid than the Honourable Magatla ever did. What I did say was the legacy is not only negative. Oliver Tambo said that. Nelson Mandela said that on numerous occasions. Mbeki says that, and every single history book except Frantz Fanon says that. And I will not ask any permission to differ from Frantz Fanon. His vision will lead us all to Venezuela, which is exactly where the ANC would like to go. So the only thing that can come to discredit me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is untruths in this House, and distortions, and fraud to insert things into quotations that don't exist. Yes, there is an increasing demand for ICT services, and we can't meet them because we had to pay 8.3% salary increases, which were unbudgeted for and way outside the envelope. I will certainly blame the ANC because it's their fault. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we all know that the size of the state has to shrink. Let me use one example. Eskom, according to the World Bank, has 66% more employees than they should. If you compare the rate of energy generation per employee in Eskom and any other utility that generates electricity anywhere in the world, you will see that we are massively, massively behind the productivity curve. And that is partly why Eskom is in what I call the utility death spiral. And when I spend such a long time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, talking about data, that's the kind of data you need. 66% overemployed in a utility death spiral that cannot be reversed under those circumstances and will lead to the complete permanent collapse of the generation utility, despite the fact that the Western Cape has a plan and a program that we have presented to National to prevent that from happening. And electricity is not even our mandate, but because we see it is so critical, we develop a plan to save South Africa, and it's there and we can do it. I am quite happy to say, and I'm quite proud of saying, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that in my office and department, to talk about a toxic working environment is about the furthest possible thing from the truth. And I would like you to do an anonymous survey between all my colleagues and find out. Everybody who works with me knows they may differ from me, knows they may challenge me, knows they may have an entire different approach from me, and they will never be bullied and they will never be undermined, because I welcome thinking, committed people who are totally focused on the cause and will challenge me if they believe I am wrong. Now, what this government, more than any others, believes in transformation, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are absolutely committed to transformation. And we understand transformation as being to improve the opportunity and life circumstances of all people, but particularly the poor, to live a better life and to live lives they value. And when that happens, we will have achieved transformation in South Africa. To ensure that we get people in government that can achieve that objective is our common purpose. We have tried to build a capable state operating under the rule of law with a culture of accountability. And that is the legacy that this government leaves for South Africa. And if South Africa builds that everywhere, this country will be a great democracy that will achieve real transformation in which life gets better for everybody. Thank you.
Order. Order. That's it. Order. Honourable Janki, I can't. Order. I can't compete with you now, please. That concludes the debate on this vote. We will suspend business for 5 minutes to allow for the officials to take up their seats, and also preparations to allow for the live streaming of our facilities. Each vote is streamed separately, so we need about 5 minutes break after each vote. The House is suspended for 5 minutes.